to really see something that said, take a look what happened. I was saved by God to make America great again.
Welcome back to a 4547blog.com presentation of the New Conservative Radio Show. I'm your host, Ninj, and you can find us on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and everywhere else you get your major podcasts. You can catch our reruns on YouTube, and we also go live on Rumble every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Our social media handle is 4547blog, and you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok. Thank you for joining us today, and let's get into the show. Welcome to the week of Liberation Day, everybody. If you didn't expect this, then you didn't listen to Trump during the election process. If you didn't expect this, if you didn't expect market instability when tariffs came on and when Trump was trying to pull manufacturing back, then you weren't paying attention. And I thank you. If you voted for Trump and you didn't know this was going to happen, thank you. Seems like there's a whole lot of these people out there who voted for Trump and didn't know that he was going to impact the economy at all, and that it could possibly be negative at first before the positive things start hitting us. If you were President Trump and you had a big agenda to put into play, and there was a number of bad things you had to do that would be perceived as bad by the people, at least initially, what would you do? You'd probably do all the bad shit first and then do the immediate stuff right after, the stuff that you know is going to redeem in the eyes of the fucking people who are oh so judgmental. Did we really think that the globalists were going to bring their products back, bring manufacturing back to America after they invested in leaving America so long ago? Did you think that they were just going to go, okay, we'll shut down our factories over here in China and just go and, build in Illinois? Did you think that was going to happen without any kind of a pushback? The markets, all the talk on the other side, this is all to be expected. Conservatives and Republicans are not the only rich people on this planet. Unfortunately, there's a lot of liberal and democratic people who are balling. Warren Buffett, George Soros, Bill Gates, the list goes on and on and on. And they put their money towards these political agendas so that they can make more money. Don't forget that lobbying exists in America, and who's the people who pay for lobbyists? It's the corporations. The corporations are always going to try to push media because they are the corporation. We keep losing over and over and over again to countries like China and Mexico because of the taxes, regulations, and fines that we impose here in America. In my last episode, I went over the innovations and the regulations and how we need to check all this stuff because it's very harmful to our economy. It's very harmful to innovation here in America and us becoming an innovator again. China has moved from an imposter position to an innovator. It studied our shit and remade our shit so many times that it understands our stuff now, and it's making new stuff. It's expounding on those ideas. That's innovation. And we are to worry that China is to pass us and surpass us in innovation. Look, pain is pain. The stock market is not the economy as a whole. Money flows in and out of the markets, and I do feel for people with 401ks and pensions that are losing money right now. But it took years to destroy our manufacturing, took years to destroy the middle class in this country. And it's not just going to happen overnight. We're not going to just wake up tomorrow and because Trump said tariffs, all the manufacturers are going to be able to come back here, buy land, bring all their equipment, hire a bunch of people, and we're going to feel the effects right away. No, this is stuff that takes time. And he's doing it within the first 90 days of his presidency. So he knows this stuff takes time. He's doing the hard stuff first, and then he's going to hit us with tax relief and stuff that's going to immediately affect our pockets after that. He's doing this as a plan. He's moving forward with a plan, and he knows what he's doing. Have faith in the president that you elected. I know there's a lot of people out there who are uncomfortable with this situation. Uncomfortable with the situation more than you were uncomfortable with the situation with Joe Biden? You feel worse now than you felt with him? Thank you for your vote. I think most people, when they think about tariffs, they're just thinking that we're trying to tax the consumer. We're going to just tax anything that's coming into our country. And that's just a bad thing for us. And it's just so terrible. But what they don't understand is that tariffs exist, and they have existed. And countries are completely blocking American companies out of their markets entirely. And we're not even talking about the trade deficit. A trade deficit occurs when a country's imports exceed its exports, resulting in a negative balance in trade. They can send all their stuff over here and they sell it, but we're not allowed to send anything over there and sell it, or else we're only allowed to send 20% of what they send over. This is a deficit, and this is the things that's not fair and equal. We don't need to be doing this with any other country. World War II is long over. These policies don't need to be in place anymore. The American people have been generous and allowed the rest of the world to grow on our backs because the rest of the world was destroyed in a great war 80 years ago. We all remember this. At least the people with a fucking brain in their head know what was going on, know what is going on. Look at some of the numbers. China has the largest deficit, trade deficit, with $295.4 billion. Every year, they're pulling $295.4 billion out of our economy. Mexico, to the south of us, they literally share a border with us. A deficit of $171.8 billion. Why do we have a deficit in order to trade with Mexico when they literally line up? They're on the border with us. We can walk to Mexico. And then Canada wants to cry. Look at Canada, $63.3 billion. And they line the border with us. They're to the north of us. These are our friends. These are our partners. These are our neighbors. Ow! Doesn't seem like they're being good neighbors to me. And I think Trump's calling a spade when it comes to this. Here's the other thing that drives me crazy is it just depends on where you're looking at what numbers they're going to give you. So sometimes it just feels like people are pulling shit out of thin air, but this article says, a trade deficit, also known as a negative balance of trade, is an economic term related to international trade. A trade deficit, in short, means that a nation's imports exceed its exports. In other words, a country with a trade deficit spends more money in a year than it receives from its exports. Many nations around the world have trade deficits, including the United Kingdom, Mexico, Brazil, and the United States. The United States has the largest deficit in the world. In 2023, the trade deficit of the nation was $773.4 billion, while the country brought in $3,826.9 billion in imports. The amount of exports was just $3,053.5 billion. The largest exports in the United States were cars, food, and commercial aircraft. The largest imports were cell phones, oil, and cars. The largest deficit in goods in the United States was with China. In fact, over 1/3 of the trade deficit, or $279 billion, is because of imports from China. The main imports that the U.S. purchased from China include clothing, machinery, and electronics. The United States also has a significant trade deficit with Mexico. This deficit is smaller than with China, that $152 billion. The U.S. has imported $475 billion worth of goods from Mexico in 2023, including vehicles and auto parts. The U.S. has the third largest deficit with Vietnam, $104 billion. The primary categories of imported goods include machinery, mechanical appliances, textiles, and footwear. The trade deficit of $83 billion with Germany is the fourth largest trade deficit in the United States in 2023, and the U.S. imported almost $160 billion in auto parts and vehicles, medicine, and machinery. The United States has a trade deficit of $71.2 billion with Japan. Vehicles and industrial supplies are among the primary imports that the U.S. acquires from Japan. The U.S. also has a $68 billion trade deficit with Canada. While the U.S. exports vehicles, petroleum, and auto parts, it imports more crude oil and gas from Canada. We don't need to be doing this, and this is being shut off by Trump. Anything that has to do with energy, gas, natural gas, coal, that's going away, and that's going to go away really quick like. It's drill, baby, drill, and Trump is going to bring back, the energy sector. I don't think we have anything to worry about. Trump just put out on April 2nd an executive order about the tariffs. It's called Regulating Imports with a Reciprocal Tariff to Rectify Trade Practices that Contribute to Large and Persistent Annual United States Good Trade Deficits. This goes into, and it literally explains throughout this whole thing, everything. It talks about where Trump is coming from and what he is going to do to change that, and what this executive order will do to change that. So I'm just going to read this and we'll go through it. It says, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that underlying conditions, including a lack of reciprocity in our bilateral trade relationships, desperate tariff rates, and non-tariff barriers, the U.S. trading partners' economic policies that suppress domestic wages and consumption, as indicated by large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits, constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and economy of the United States. That threat has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States and the domestic economic policies of key trading partners and structural imbalances in the global trading system. I hereby declare that national emergency with respect to this threat, or declare a national emergency. On January 20th, 2025, I signed the America First Trade Policy Presidential Memorandum directing my administration to investigate the causes for our country's large and persistent annual trade deficits in goods, including the economic and national security implications and risk resulting from such deficits, and to undertake a review of and identify any unfair trade practices by other countries. On February 13th, 2025, I signed a presidential memorandum entitled Reciprocal Trade and Tariffs. That directed further review of our trading partners' non-reciprocal trading practices, and noting the relationship between non-reciprocal practices and the trade deficit. On April 1st, 2025, I received the final results of those investigations, and I am taking action today based on those results. Large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits have led to the hollowing out of our manufacturing base, inhibited our ability to scale advanced domestic manufacturing capacity, undermined critical supply chains, and rendered our defense industrial base dependent on foreign adversaries. Large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits are caused in substantial part by a lack of reciprocity in our bilateral trade relationships. This situation is evidenced by desperate tariff rates and non-tariff barriers that made it harder for U.S. manufacturers to sell their products in foreign markets. It is also evidenced by the economic policies of key U.S. trading partners insofar as they surpass domestic wages and consumption, and thereby demand for U.S. exports, while artificially increasing the competitiveness of their goods in global markets. These conditions have given rise to the national emergency that this order is intended to abate and resolve. For decades, starting in 1934, U.S. trade policy has been organized around the principle of reciprocity. The Congress redirected the president to secure reduced reciprocal tax rates from key tariff partners, first through bilateral trade agreements and later until the auspices of the global trading system. Between 1934 and 1945, the executive branch negotiated and signed 32 bilateral reciprocal trade agreements designed to lower tariff rates on a reciprocal basis. After 1947 through 1994, participating countries engaged in 8 rounds of negotiation, which resulted in the General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade, the GATT, and 7 subsequent tariff reduction rounds. However, despite the commitment to the principle of reciprocity, the trading relationship between the United States and its trading partners has become highly unbalanced, particularly in the recent years. The post-war international economic system was based upon 3 incorrect assumptions. First, that the United States would lead the world in liberalizing tariff and non-tariff barriers. The rest of the world would follow. I don't know why we always think that if we do something, if we're the first ones to leap off the bridge, that everybody else is going to do it. But this has been the mind state of the United States that, oh, we're the big golden, city on the hill. So if we do something, then everybody else is just going to follow us like a bunch of fucking lemmings. Doesn't make any sense. Second, that such liberation would ultimately result in more economic convergence and increased domestic consumption among U.S. trading partners converging towards the share in the United States. And third, that as a result, the United States would not accrue large and persistent goods trade deficits. Well, we all know how that turned out. It says, this framework set in motion events, agreements, and commitments that did not result in reciprocity or generally increased domestic consumption in foreign economies related to domestic consumption in the United States. Those events in turn created large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits as a feature of the global trading system. Put simply, while World Trade Organization WTO members agreed to bind their tariff rates on a most favored nation MFN basis and thereby provide their best tariff rates to all WTO members, they did not agree to bind their tariff rates at similarly low levels or to apply tariff rates on a reciprocal basis. Consequently, according to the WTO, the United States has among the lowest simple average MFN tariff rates in the world at 3.3%, while many of our key trading partners like Brazil, 11.2%, China, 7.5%, the European Union, 5%, India, 17%, and Vietnam, 9.4%, have simple average MFN tariff rates that are significantly higher. Moreover, these average MFN tariff rates conceal much larger discrepancies across economies on tariff rates applied to particular products. For example, the United States imposes a 2.5% tariff on passenger vehicle imports, while internal combustion engines, while the European Union 10%, India 70%, and China 15% impose much higher duties on the same product. For network switches and routers, the United States imposes a 0% tariff, but for similar products, India 10% levies a higher rate. Brazil 18% and Indonesia 30% impose a higher tariff on ethanol than does the United States at 2.5%. For rice on the husk, the U.S. MFN tariff is 2.7%, ad valorem equivalent, while India is 80%. Malaysia's 40%, and Turkey, an average of 31%, impose higher rates. Apples enter the United States duty-free, but not so in Turkey, 60.3%, and India, it's 50%. Similarly, non-tariff barriers also deprive U.S. manufacturers of reciprocal access to markets around the world. The 2025 National Trade Estimate Report on Foreign Trade Barriers, the NTE, details a great number of non-tariff barriers to U.S. exports around the world on a trading partner by trading partner basis. These barriers include import barriers and licensing restrictions, customs barriers, and shortcomings on trade facilitation. Technical barriers to trade, e.g., unnecessary trade restricted standards, conformity assessment procedures, or technical regulations, sanitary and philanthrosanitary measures that unnecessarily restrict trade without furthering safety objectives, inadequate patent, copyright, trade secret, and trademark regimes, and inadequate enforcement of intellectual property rights, discriminatory licensing requirements or regulatory standards, barriers to cross-border data flows, and discriminatory practices affecting trade with digital products, investment barriers, subsidies, anti-competitive practices, discrimination in favor of domestic state-owned enterprises, and failures by governments in protecting labor and environment standards, bribery, and corruption. This is literally talking about China and how they're taking all of our shit, cloning it, and stamping a different company's name on it. And that was the imitator that China used to be. And now that they've imitated us so much, they're understanding how everything works and they're becoming innovators and making things better. This continues on to go and say, moreover, non-tariff barriers include the domestic economic policies and practices of our trading partners, including currency practices and value-added taxes, and their associated market distortions that suppress domestic consumption and boost exports to the United States. This lack of reciprocity is apparent in the fact that the share of consumption to gross domestic product, GDP, in the United States is about 68%, but it is much lower in others, like Ireland at 27%, Singapore at 31%, China at 39%, South Korea at 49%, and Germany at 50%. At the same time, efforts by the United States to address these imbalances have stalled. Trading partners have repeatedly blocked multilateral and plurilateral solutions, including in the context of new rounds of tariff negotiations and efforts to discipline non-tariff barriers. At the same time, with the U.S. economy disproportionately open to imports, U.S. trading partners have had few incentives to provide reciprocal treatments to U.S. exports in the context of bilateral trade negotiations. Why change something that they're making so much money on? You know, why would they want to come to the table when they could just walk all over us and steal all of our shit? It says, these structural asymmetries have driven the large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficit. Even for countries with which the United States may enjoy an occasional bilateral trade surplus, the accumulation of tariff and non-tariff barriers on U.S. exports may make that surplus smaller than it would have been without such barriers. Permitting these asymmetries to continue is not sustainable to today's economic and geopolitical environment because of the effect they have on the U.S. domestic population. A nation's ability to produce domestically is the bedrock of its national and economic security. And, you know, it sucks to say, but the kids, the younger generation, new conservatives that don't have a house, people that don't have a car, that don't have stocks in the stock market, they don't care about this as much as people that do, that have 401ks, that have pensions. The younger generation is literally saying, fuck you guys. You sold us out and now reap the benefit or the pain of everything being switched back, of having the jobs that our grandparents once had. I'm not a spring chicken, but I can tell definitely that my father and my grandparents had it easier in the sense that economy was much better. You could carry an average job and you could afford a house and a car and to take care of your family in a nice middle-class neighborhood. Now you have to pay $2,000 just to rent a fucking place, and you're getting paid shit. You got to have 2-3 jobs and hustle your ass off 24/7, or you're never going to make anything of yourself. This isn't the way that it was intended to be. But I digress. This article goes on to say, both my first administration in 2017 and the Biden administration in 2020 recognized that increased domestic manufacturing is critical to the U.S. national security. According to 2023 United States data, U.S. manufacturing input as a share of global manufacturing output was 17.4%, down from the peak in 2001 of 28.4%. That's a lot. of manufacturing gone. That's almost 10%. Over time, the persistent decline in U.S. manufacturing output has reduced U.S. manufacturing capacity. The need to maintain robust and resilient domestic manufacturing capacity is particularly acute in certain advanced industrial sectors like automobiles, shipbuilding, pharmaceuticals, technology products, machine tools, and basic and fabricated metals. Because once competitors gain sufficient global market share in these sectors, U.S. production could be permanently weakened. It is so critical to scale manufacturing capacity in the defense industry or in the defense industrial sector so that we can manufacture the defense material and equipment necessary to protect American interests at home and abroad. And this is what I was talking about last week also. If we ever go to war, we're going to need the capability to convert factories over to military creation, to load, bullets, to create guns, make gun barrels, make grenades, make bombs. All that stuff is vital for a country to be able to do. It's not like we want to do it, but we have to have the capability in order to do it. It goes on to say, in fact, because the United States has supplied so much military equipment to other countries, U.S. stockpiles of military goods are too low to be compatible with U.S. national defense interests. Furthermore, U.S. defense companies must develop new advanced manufacturing technologies across a range of critical sectors, including biomanufacturing, batteries, and microelectronics. If the United States wishes to maintain an effective security umbrella to defend its citizens and homeland, as well as for its allies and partners, it needs to have a large upstream manufacturing and goods producing ecosystem to manufacture these products without undue reliance on imports for key inputs, which would be the Taiwan situation with the pandemic when we couldn't get any semiconductors. We couldn't get these chips. In a situation where we need these and we can't get these, this is bad for us, and we need to be able to create here at home again. And again, creating at home is not hurting anyone. The only person it's hurting is the rich people who have to bring their fucking factories back. And honestly, 90% of Americans, 99% of Americans don't care, because the people who own all this shit are the 1%, the people who have all the fucking money anyways. 1% holds 90% of the money. Never forget that. But I digress again. It says, increased resilience in foreign producers for goods also has compromised U.S. economic security by rendering U.S. supply chains vulnerable to geopolitical distribution and supply shocks. In recent years, the vulnerability of the U.S. economy in this respect was exposed both during the COVID-19 pandemic and when Americans had difficulty accessing essential products, as well as when the Houthi rebels later began attacking cargo ships in the Middle East. The decline of U.S. manufacturing capacity threatens the U.S. economy in other ways, including through the loss of manufacturing jobs. From 1997 to 2024, the United States lost around 5 million manufacturing jobs and experienced one of the largest drops in manufacturing employment in history. Furthermore, many manufacturing jobs losses were concentrated in specific geographical areas. In these areas, the loss of manufacturing jobs contributed to the decline in rates of family formation and to the rise of other social trends, like the abuse of opioids, that have imposed profound cost on the U.S. economy. The future of American competitiveness depends on reversing these trends. Today, manufacturing represents just 11% of U.S. gross domestic product, yet it accounts for 35% of American productivity growth and 60% of our exports. Importantly, U.S. manufacturing is the main engine of innovation in the United States, responsible for 55% of all patents and 70% of all research and development spending. The fact that R&D expenditures by U.S. multinational enterprises in China grew at an average rate of 13.6% a year between 2003 and 2017, while their R&D expenditures in the United States grew by an average of just 5% per year during the same time period, is evidence of a strong link between manufacturing and innovation. Furthermore, every manufacturing job spurs 7 to 12 new jobs and other related industries, helping to build and sustain the economy. And this is what I've seen the Dems freaking out about on online. It's like we bring the manufacturing back home here, and they're like, well, we're still going to need to get raw materials from other countries. And it's like, yeah, dumbass, we're not cutting other countries off completely. We're just trying to bring manufacturing home so that we have jobs here. We're going to buy materials from other people because we need raw materials. It's not like we're going to just bring everything in home and bring everything in house and not buy anything from anybody. We're still trying to have a free and fair trade, but we're trying to remove all these deafening fucking tariffs that everybody's slapping us with. Just as a nation that does not produce manufactured products can not maintain the industrial base it needs for national security, neither can a nation long survive if it cannot produce its own food. Presidential Policy Directive 21 of February 12, 2013, Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience, designates food and agriculture as a critical infrastructure sector because it is one of the sectors considered so vital to the United States that its incapacity or destruction would have a debilitating impact on security, national impact security, national public health or safety, or any combination of those matters. Furthermore, when I left office, the United States had a trade surplus in agricultural products, but today that surplus has vanished, eviscerated by a slew of new non-tariff barriers imposed by our trading partners. It has been replaced by a projected $49 billion agricultural trade deficit. For these reasons, I hereby declare and order Section 1 a national emergency. As President of the United States, my highest duty is ensuring the national and economic security of the country and its citizens. I have declared a national emergency arising from conditions reflected in large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits, which have grown by over 40% in the last 5 years alone, reaching $1.2 trillion in 2024. This trade deficit reflects asymmetries in trade relationships that have contributed to the atrophy of domestic production capacity, especially that of the U.S. manufacturing and defense industrial base. These asymmetries also impact U.S. producers' ability to export and consequently their incentive to produce. Specifically, such asymmetries include not only non-reciprocal differences in tariff rates among foreign trading partners, but also extensive use of non-tariff barriers by foreign trading partners, which reduce the competitiveness of U.S. exports while artificially enhancing the competitiveness of their own goods. These non-tariff barriers include technical barriers to trade, non-scientific sanitary and phytosanitary rules, inadequate intellectual property protections, suppressed domestic consumption, e.g. wage suppression, weak labor, environmental, and other regulatory standards and protections, and corruption. These non-tariff barriers give rise to significant imbalances even when the United States and a trading partner have comparable tariff rates. The cumulative effect of these imbalances has been to transfer of resources of domestic producers from foreign firms, reducing opportunities for domestic manufacturers to expand and in turn leading to lost manufacturing jobs, diminished manufacturing capacity, and an atrophied industrial base, including in the defense industrial sector. I mean, you could totally tell that because we're paying $90,000 for a fucking bolt on an airplane, when they could buy the machine that would machine the bolt for $90,000 and make it themselves. But enough said. It says, at the same time, foreign firms are better positioned to scale production, reinvest in innovation, and compete in the global economy to the detriment of U.S. economic and national security. The absence of sufficient domestic manufacturing capability in certain critical and advanced industrial sectors, another outcome of the large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits, also compromises U.S. economic and national security by rendering the U.S. economy less resilient to supply chain disruption. Which everybody's been screaming about this, and it's this. If you pay any fucking attention, all this just makes sense, and I don't understand how the Democrats can even try to talk bad about this. But finally, the large persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits and the concomitant loss of industrial capacity have compromised military readiness. This vulnerability can only be readdressed through swift corrective action to rebalance the flow of imports into the United States. Such impact upon military readiness and our national security posture is especially acute with the recent rise in armed conflicts abroad. I call upon the public and private sector to make the efforts necessary to strengthen the international economic position of the United States. Section 2. Reciprocal Tariff Policy. It is the policy of the United States to rebalance global trade flows by imposing an additional ad valorem duty on all imports, all trading partners, except as otherwise provided herein. The additional ad valorem duty on all imports from all trading partners shall start at 10%, and shortly thereafter, the additional ad valorem duty shall increase for trading partners enumerated in Annex 1 to this order at the rates set forth in Annex 1 to this order. These additional ad valorem duties shall apply until such time as I determine that the underlying condition described above are satisfied, resolved, or mitigated. Section 3. Implementation. A. Except as otherwise provided in this order, all articles imported into the customs territory of the United States shall be consistent with law, subject to an additional ad valorem rate of duty of 10%. Such rates of duty shall apply with respect to goods entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption on or after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April 5th, 2025. Except the goods loaded into a vessel at the port of loading and in transit on the final mode of transit before 12:01 Eastern Daylight Time on April 5th, 2025. And entering for consumption or withdraw from warehouse for consumption after 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April 5th, 2025 shall not be subject to such additional duties. So they're just setting times and basically, game time. Furthermore, except as otherwise provided in this order, at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April 9th, 2025, all articles from trading partners enumerated in Annex 1 to this order imported into the customs territory of the United States shall be consistent with law, subject to the country-specified ad valorem rates of duty specified in Annex 1 of this order. Such rates of duty shall apply with respect to goods entered for consumption or withdraw from a warehouse for consumption on or after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April 9th, 2025, except that goods loaded into a vessel at the port of loading and in transit on the final mode of transit before 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April 9th, 2025, and entered for consumption or withdraw from the warehouse for consumption after 12:01 Daylight Time. Yeah, this is all the same. It's just setting times. It says these country-specific ad valorem rates of duty shall apply to all articles imported pursuant to the terms of all existing U.S. trade agreements, except as provided below. So then it goes B, the following goods as set forth in Annex 2 in this order, consistent with law, shall be subject to the ad valorem rates of duty under this order. 1. All articles that are encompassed by 50 U.S.C. 1702b2 are all articles and derivatives of steel and aluminum subject to the duties imposed pursuant to the Section 232 Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and proclaimed in proclamation. Bunch of fucking mumbo jumbo. They're basically talking about putting the tariff on steel and aluminum. They're trying to bring steel and aluminum back to the United States. Here goes. Other products enumerated by Annex 2 in this order, including copper, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, lumber articles, certain critical minerals, and energy products. All articles from a trading partner subject to the rates set forth in Column 2 of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States, the HTSUS, and all articles that may become subject to duties pursuant to future actions under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. A whole bunch of bullshit there, but it's basically saying we're putting tariffs on steel imports. We're putting tariffs on copper, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, lumber, certain critical materials, and energy products. All things that Trump, promised to bring back home. So that no big surprise there. On to Section C. The rates of duty established by this order are in addition to any other duties, fees, taxes, extractions, or charges applicable to such imported articles, except as provided in subsections D and E of this section below. D. With respect to articles from Canada, I have imposed additional duties on certain goods to address the national energy or the national emergency resulting from the flow of illicit drugs across our northern border pursuant to Executive Order 14193 of February 1st, 2025, imposing duties to address the flow of illicit drugs across the northern border, as amended by Executive Order 14197 of February 3rd, 2025, progress on the situation at our northern border, and Executive Order 14231 of March 2nd, 2025, amendment to duties to address the flow of illicit drugs across our northern border. With respect to the articles from Mexico, I have imposed additional duties on certain goods to address a national emergency resulting from the flow of illicit drugs and illegal immigration across our southern border pursuant to Executive Order 14194 of February 1st, 2025, imposing duties to address the situation at our southern border. As amended by Executive Order 14198 of February 3rd, 2025, progress on the situation at our southern border, and Executive Order 14227 of March 2nd, 2025, amendment on duties to address the situation at our southern border. As a result of these border emergency tariff actions, all goods of Canada or Mexico under the terms of General Note 11 to the HTSUS, including any treatment set forth in Subchapter 23 of Chapter 98 and Subchapter 22 of Chapter 99 of the HTSUS, as related to the agreement between the United States of America, United Mexican States, and Canada, USMCA, continue to be eligible to enter the U.S. market under these preferential terms. However, all goods of Canada or Mexico that do not qualify as originating under USMCA are presently subject to an additional ad valorem duties of 25%, with energy or energy resources and potash imported from Canada and not qualifying as originating under USMCA presently subject to the lower additional ad valorem duty of 10%. The rest of the article, the executive order, it's just a bunch of, technical stuff, not very interesting stuff. The requirements for implementation, things like that. What I do want to say is that these tariffs, they're serious for bringing home manufacturing, and it's going to hurt us in the short term. The stock markets and prices of things are immediately going to be affected in a negative manner, and that's something that I think we're all prepared to undergo. We've already had 4 years of bullshit. Why not one more in order to make it better, 2 more, however long it takes. But I have a feeling that Trump he has a goal in mind, and nobody really knows what's going on with that. So nobody can really tell us how this is going to turn out. But one thing I do know is if you've listened to this show, there are a lot of parallels between Argentina and what Javier Milei did with his country when he afuela'd all kinds of governmental agencies and employees right the fuck out of the government. And it had an immediate impact where a lot of people lost their jobs, they revolted, they protested, just like they're doing here, and then they found another job. And Milei also imposed tariffs so that he could bring back manufacturing to his own nation. This article that I found was written last year in 2024, and let's go ahead and get into this one. So the headline is Milei Tackles Tariffs, and it was written on September 4th of 2024 by Andrew Studiford. It says, Argentine President Javier Milei's efforts to crush inflation and to bring back economic sanity to his country continues, despite some rough political going recently over pensions and within his party, which is only to be expected given the extent of the challenge he faces. He still has a long, long way to go. Milei's moves in certain tariffs have, however, been illuminating. An economist as well as a president, he continues to as close to being one of those legendary market fundamentalists as can be found in the political wild. Javier Milei was an economist who got elected as president of Argentina, and his far-right ideas have actually pulled Argentina out of the fucking garbage, and their government is on pace to make a surplus already. This article goes on and says, as an economist, he is no fan of tariffs, to be clear. It is not only market fundamentalists who share that view. As an Argentinian economist, he knows the role that tariffs played in supporting the turn of industrial policy in mid-century Argentina. Same thing that happened here, happened in Argentina, happened in a lot of places that used to manufacture back in the day. A lot of people used to go to Argentina and picked Argentina over the United States to go to and to immigrate to permanently. Back in the mid 1900s, and then that all went away because of, socialism and communism and all that bullshit, but that's another story. It goes on to say, when Milei took office, he increased Argentina's wide-ranging PAIS tax, which is applied to certain transactions, acts as an import tariff. As part of his efforts to cut the country's out-of-control deficit, PAIS, the tax for inclusive and supportive Argentina, inclusive of course, at the time Milei described the increase in the tax from 7.5% to 17% as temporary, which it has proved to be. The question is now, how will he fill the revenue hole left by the tax cut? So he imposed tariffs, and it drove business within the country. It drove private industry, and then he reduced the tax cut. Do we see something that could happen here? I'm not saying that this is something that Trump is going to do, because he's saying he's not going to. But we are a bigger country than Argentina, so the change is going to take a little bit more time. Milei has set the blueprint, and we're kind of following in the same steps. It's not step for step, but it's down that same path. Argentina had rising inflation that was just rampant. It was rising out of control, and that's something that we don't have a problem with. We do have inflation that we are, combating right now, but it's nothing like what Argentina's was. This article by Reuters says that Milei slashed public spending after taking office in December of 2023 in a bid to tamp out rampant inflation, which hit an annual peak of nearly 300% in April of last year. We're facing less than double digits percent of inflation, and Milei was facing hundreds of percent of inflation. So the path that we're taking, which is similar to Argentina's, is definitely going to drive inflation down. It's only a matter of time. And with the way that Trump attacks stuff and his plans and the cabinet and the people that he has behind him, I have full faith that we are not going to be feeling the pain of this for very long. It took 1 year for Milei to turn around a surplus, and I am confident that Trump will be able to do something similar with the United States economy. The world is a neighborhood. It's not a single house. And you don't tell your neighbors what to do and how to live and what they have in their house and what they can sell or where they can work, what cars they can have. And this is the same with countries. We are a single house in a neighborhood, and our neighbors are not going to tell us what car to drive, where to shop, or anything like that. There's a political shift that's going on. It's the death of the neocons. It's the globalist agenda is dying, and they're flailing right now. It's a fish out of water, and they're just taking their last breaths. They're gasping. They're doing bullshit like, oh, you want to put tariffs on our country, we're going to pull all of our money out of your stock market. The thing about the American stock market is it's not just Americans that are in the American stock market. This is a worldwide trading institution. So you don't have to live in America to be a part of our market. And when lefties and other countries are invested in our stock market and they're mad at Trump, they're pulling all their money out, and they're doing this. This is market manipulation. So we have nothing to fear by looking at the stock market. The stock market is only a snapshot at an economy. It is not a representation of the full economy. The world liberals are glad to see the United States isolating. And because of that, I say, watch us reap the consequences of U.S. isolation. Watch us reap all the consequences of what happens when we bring manufacturing home. Watch what happens to your country when we bring all this shit back home and you want to act stupid and try to hit us with higher tariffs or whatever. Like, a majority of this tariff policy is coming directly for China. We want to take China out of the spot it is globally. We want to take a lot of the money away from China because they generate more money off of the American economy than anything else. America has the biggest consumer economy in the world. America has taken a position of an old adage, which is no better friend, no worse enemy. We don't have best friends out here. We have some allies. You guys are all equal. We don't have worst enemies out here. If you're our enemy, you are equal. And this is the way that it should be. It's time to bring America back to its former greatness, and Donald Trump has been spouting this and touting this for almost a decade. It is so good to see how many people have gotten on board with this, and especially you young people out there. I completely understand. And if you try to put yourself into their shoes, if you're in the older generation, you understand that we outsourced everything to the point where we got rid of the jobs, the class, that middle class sector of our country that a lot of older generations prospered out of. They got their nest egg out of those industries, and those industries are now gone. We raped and pillaged our country away, and we are now going to take the hits in order to bring it back so that we can reap the economic benefits of manufacturing, of doing things in-house in the future. We should never again allow manufacturing to leave our country. And we need to do this before automation becomes too big of a thing. Because if you listen to my last episode, it is hard to enter a market that is highly advanced when someone else is already dominating that market. And China is dominating manufacturing right now, but automation is not at a point to where it will be in the future. We still have time. We still have time to develop AI. Trump is getting our energy sector going. Globalism is dead. This is a new conservative movement, and I'm so glad to have you guys with me. This is America first, and it's something that we haven't witnessed, at least in my lifetime. I'm middle-aged. I haven't seen any president deliver on his promises like this president has delivered for us already. Globalism is dead. Globalism is dead. Globalism is dead. Say it 3 times, say it 10 times, say it 100 fucking times. That shit is gone. It's America first all day. Now let's go ahead and roll this clip by Stephen Miller.
The United States is 36% of global consumption, and we're more than 25% of the world's economy. Just the United States alone. That means we get to set the rules and terms for international trade. But we've done the opposite as a country for decades now. When we hear the term globalization, what does that really mean? It means taking America's wealth and shipping it to foreign countries. So all the factories that used to be in America are now in China, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Canada, Mexico, parts of Africa, India, Europe, Japan, Korea. You know where they're not? The United States of America. Because our leaders allowed foreign countries to rig the rules of the game, to cheat, to steal, to rob, to plunder. That has cost America trillions of dollars in wealth. These countries cannot win a trade fight with us because they're already the ones who have cheated. So in other words, they've stolen our industries. We have all the upside here in this fight because we can now make these industries come back because we have the market. We have the consumers they need.
Look at the countries he mentioned and rewind back to the charts in the beginning. We have the cards. We have the power. We control access to our market. We control market access. We have 36% of the market's consumption on the planet. The rest of the world is 74%. We are 36% of that, and no other country is higher. A conglomerate of countries, yes, but not one single country. The corporations want to appease stockholders no matter what. So the corporations are going to do what's in the best interest for their company. They're either going to come back and manufacture their stuff here, or they're going to pay the tariff. Either one is good for our country. How is getting paid a tariff bad? Trump is going to cut our taxes. Right now, he's doing all the things that hurt, like I said. He's going to do the easy things after that because those are going to be the direct things that will affect our pockets immediately, like the tax cuts that Congress is working on right now. American liberals and the boomers who are all invested in the stock market, like, I feel for the stock market. I feel for people who are invested. Their retirement is in that. And the stock market's going to come back, as it always does. It's just going to take time. Look at the pandemic. That destroyed world markets, and then it came back. So if you have some money, I'm not trying to give you financial advice, but again, look at the markets. This is a fire sale. That's the way I would look at it. But the liberals and the boomers, in the so-called middle even, they're addicted to instant gratification. They have no patience. These people want what they want when they want it, and that's all there is to it. That's why they cry. That's why they make such a big stink about everything, because they have never been taught patience, never said, hey, you know what? It's going to be here, but tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I know we talked a lot about the executive order, but I just don't want anybody to conflate what is going on with that executive order. And it was good information because it literally explained why he was writing it in the beginning, and then what measures that they took to, try to reduce the impact of that or completely negate it altogether. Thank you guys for joining me this week. I really appreciate it. And I hope you join me next week. We'll be back again next week on Rumble Live at 8 p.m. Eastern. And give us a like, a follow, share, tell your friends about us, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one.
We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night. I love you.
President Donald Trump knows how to make America great. Deal from strength or get crushed every time.